NBA talk, as we usually do. I've been searching for things to talk about. Not much really going on in the NBA right now, at least not what's important to me. So we're going to talk about this today, and we're going to talk about the subject of North American or North American. We'll get into that later, but we'll just say for now, American-born white NBA players, and how many are quote-unquote stars, superstars. Um, are they a minority in the league? All those sort of things. How valuable are they? Are there guys where you can really look at? So we'll talk about that. Now, I think it's important to make the distinction of whether or not we consider all North American players the same. I'm not talking about European players because obviously you got guys like Dirk Nowitzki, who is one of the best players of all time on the list. So we're only talking about these players. But if we're including North American and Canadian-born players, you would start to look at a guy like Steve Nash, and certainly he would he would bolster the credibility of the North American born white players, a guy who won 2 MVP awards. Now, again, we're talking about nowadays because back in the day, of course, you used to have guys like George Mikan. I mean, going way back, you had, the George Mikans. Then you had the Bob Cousy's. Then you had the John Havliceks, the Jerry Wests. You had then in the 80s the Larry Birds. Kevin McHale was also a Laker. You had guys like Dave Cowens in there, Bill Laimbeer. Going into the 90s, a guy like John Stockton was introduced in the 80s, and then coming into the 90s. And then after that, it's sort of where it really died off. I mean, you have other players in there as well, not quite on the level of anyone I just mentioned. I mean, all those guys are Hall of Famers. Now, going into the 2000s, though, a guy like a Steve Nash, if we're including North American, Canadians as well, would really bolster the credibility. Kind of that bridge gap. Then you get to a guy like Kevin Love. Some people would be like, well, is Kevin Love a superstar, a game changer? I don't know. I mean, this is a guy who's averaging over 11.5 rebounds in his career. His numbers are down a bit this year, just under 16 points, still at 10 rebounds, but he has had some big seasons. In 2013, 2014, 26 points, 12.5 rebounds. The year before, he averaged 14 rebounds. So this guy has been a rebounding machine. He can shoot lights out from three-point land. Now, his playoff success obviously didn't have any. He could not take that Minnesota team to the playoffs. And you look at a guy like a Kevin Garnett who is able to, a guy who's won an MVP. So, obviously not at this stages in their career are they comparable players. You'd have to give it to Kevin Love, of course. But if you're judging it that way as far as superstar talent, where a Kevin Garnett was back in the day, one of the greatest players of all time, Kevin Love certainly has not reached that level, but he is certainly up there in the upper echelon of players in the league. Another guy in the league right now who I think is on his way up, he's averaging 20 points per game this season. I believe every year in his career, his point per game total has gone up. I'm not too sure about that. I'd like to double check if we could, but that is Gordon Hayward of the Utah Jazz. Hayward is a guy, as we just discussed, is averaging 20 points a game this season, so that's very impressive. He's only at 14.5 for his career. He's been in the league now for, I believe this is his 5th season, may even be his 6th. He came in 2010. If you remember, he played at Butler, was part of that Final Four team. Yeah, this is already his 6th year, and in his career, he's gone from 5.4 points to 11.8 to 14.1 to 16.2 to 19.3 to 20 points per game. Now, his shooting percentage is only 43% this season, 43.2. For his career, it's 43.8, just south of 44, so that's not great. It's fluctuated. It's actually gone down. His first year, he shot 48.5. Now, he didn't take that many shots. Obviously, he was only playing 16. Just under 17 minutes a game, was only averaging 5.4 points, so it's easier to have a higher shooting percentage. But it kind of went down, 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 then back up, and then down again. So this is a guy who his shooting percentage you would have to concern yourself with. But I certainly think Gordon Hayward is a guy who would be a star player. Superstar, a little bit short. But I think if you took Gordon Hayward off Utah, he's having trouble getting that team into the playoffs. But if you took him off of a Utah team, put him in another situation, Let's just take the Charlotte Hornets, for example, and you teamed him up with some other players who we'll get into later, of course, but guys like Kemba Walker, Al Jefferson, guys on that team. I think Gordon Hayward would be the best player on a team with a good collection of players that would be going to the playoffs and competing and making runs at conference championships, things like that. Probably short of a championship team, he would need a player better than that. But Gordon Hayward is a guy you have to look at. Another guy going back a little bit, sort of that bridge from after the '90s when John Stockton retired to now, would be a David Lee, who's still in the league. His numbers have gone down a bit. He's really not that old. He's only 32. He'll be turning 33 in a little over a month, about a month and a half. This is a guy, though, for his career, 14 and a half points and 9.2 rebounds per game. Not bad at all. And you look at the way his numbers have gone down. He's had years, 2009, 2010 with the Knicks, 20 points, 11.7 rebounds per game, so just shy of 20 and 12. In 2011, 2012, averaged 20 and 9.6. Even later on with Golden State, 18 and a half, 11.2. Now last year in the championship run, 7 points, 4 rebounds per game. The two previous years, not great. When they were, or excuse me, that was this year with Boston. Last year with Golden State, 7.9 points, 5 rebounds per game, so 8 and 5 basically. The two previous years, though, years they went to the playoffs, 18 points, just shy of 9 rebounds, 18 and a half points, over 11 rebounds. So David Lee has produced in this league. Let's not get it twisted for a second like this guy hasn't been a quality player. Again, is he up there with the best of the best? No, but still a star player. And now we're going to talk about guys who I think can certainly move up the list. Again, this would be going back to whether or not you're considering Canadian players as part of it. I believe North America is, just as cities like Vancouver, where this guy is from and was born in Toronto, and that's Kelly Olynyk. I believe that these places are just as American as anywhere else. It's North America. So Kelly Olynyk, you look at a guy up this year, 10 points, 4 rebounds per game. He's more of a three-point shooter. As for Kelly Olynyk's game, I'm not going to get too much into it. I'd like to see him be much more of a post presence. But certainly I believe this guy is on the way up. He's injured right now. He's set to come back pretty soon. But he's certainly rising in this league. Another guy would be a rookie this season. That's Frank Kaminsky III out of Wisconsin playing for the Charlotte Hornets. This is a guy right around 7 points and I believe 4 rebounds. Going to bring that up right now. Yeah, 7.4 points, 4.1 rebounds. He's only getting 21 minutes per game, though. So a guy, a 7-footer, who I certainly think can be a productive player in this league and will be at some point. Other guys, a guy who's been in the league for a little bit, Chandler Parsons, averaging about 13 points. He's put up some bigger point numbers than that. Certainly a productive player. I thought he was very good in Houston. And in Dallas, he hasn't been his best, but still a guy who is a good player. J.J. Redick, of course, has been in the league for a while. J.J. Redick has really been averaging very good and consistent points, right around 15. He's up at 16 points this year for the last couple of years. He's really developed himself to more because he's been starting. He started every game this year for the Los Angeles Clippers. He is a guy who has, when he came into the league, I thought would be a sharpshooter off the bench, and that would be his role. A lot of people didn't even know if he could make it in the league, but he was certainly able to do that, and I've been very impressed with J.J. Redick. This year, 16.7 points. His rebounds are down, but he's shooting. He's not a 50-40-90 guy, but he is an 85-45-45 guy this season, so that's very impressive as well. And you look at some of his point totals, the way they've gone up. Basically every year in his career, it looks like it has. As apart from his rookie year where he averaged 6, and then down to his second year, it was at 4.1. You go every year after that, his point total is improved, and he's averaging 11.4 per his career. But the last 2 years, including this one, over 16 points, 15 points the years before that. So J.J. Redick is a guy who I feel has developed into a star player in this league. So there was the talk about Duke last year, all the white guys that Duke produces, and What can, they were talking more about how they're dirty players, things like that. You certainly have had the guys who were good in college who have turned out to be busts in the NBA. Christian Laettner, it wasn't really a bust, but Adam Morrison certainly was. Uh, and it's something that people don't really think about. They don't, I mean, they'll look at a Kevin Love and be like, well, that's the only one, basically. But there are other guys who are American born white players who do play well. Doug McDermott is another guy who I think in his second year will not be great. I don't think he'll ever even reach a J.J. Redick or a Chandler Parsons, but a guy who will be productive. And I think it's more of a situation where just superstar players in the NBA are a minority in any capacity. It's just really that simple. There are only maybe, 4 or 5 guys who you're saying are absolutely elite level. James, Curry, Durant, possibly a Harden you throw in there. You have the legends, of course, the Dirk Nowitzkis, the Kobe Bryants, but they're not at that point, obviously, anymore. I don't know if I'm really leaving anyone out of just the top. I mean, outside of James, James, Curry, and Durant, there's a ton of players who are just, are not necessarily in that level, but are just shy, are still great players. I mean, Westbrook, are you going to put him up there? Maybe. We'll just give it at 5, name your 5 top, and then after that, we'll say that there's a drop-off. So we'll just throw Westbrook and James Harden into that group just for the sake of this discussion to put some perspective on it. There are plenty of guys, white, black, Chinese, Spanish, whoever, who just aren't top players in the league. Marc Gasol, a guy from Spain, he's a very good player, but he is still not an elite player. It's very hard to be an elite player in the NBA. So yes, there aren't many white guys who are quote unquote stars, but they're still in there, and if you look for them, you would certainly find them.